Today, while a majority of Californians are of Latin American descent, only 3% of funders and 2% of founders identify as Latin American, respectively. And that represents less than 1% of investing and private equity dollars. We want to connect the dots today and bring together a really important network of individuals and shine a spotlight to create a space for leaders of underrepresented communities to amplify their voices. Our moderator for today is going to be Danny Navarro, who is the lead of global brand and the Latino Founders Fund recently launched at Google via Google for Startups. So he'll be driving the conversation today. And the panelists that'll join him, and they'll definitely introduce themselves. But we've got Angela Guzman, who's founder and CEO of Tjiko, which is an award-winning startup that offers real-time online coaching through its platform. We've got Ashley Aydin, who is a principal at VamosVentures, which is a firm on a mission to deliver meaningful impact through wealth creation, social mobility, unique tech solutions, and taking a visible and clear stand as diverse investors. And then we've got Tiq Chapa, who's an investor at Ulu Ventures, which is a seed stage firm that actively seeks and funds women and diverse founder teams. And GB, we've had a long connection with Ulu and at some point an LP position. And so the group is going to discuss the fast-growing opportunity that VCs are missing, challenges in the industry that this group of individuals is excited about, but they're also going to speak and share their identities as Latinx funders and founders, and some of the challenges and the opportunities we have ahead. So with that, feel free to use the chat, ask your questions. Danny's going to go through as he moderates and make sure to incorporate your questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Danny Navarro to get the conversation kicked off.
Thanks, Candace. I just want to say thanks again to everyone that's joining, and we can get this party started. Tiq, we're going to kick it off with you. I invited you, or maybe somebody else invited you to this, but why are you here? Like, why, you heard Latinx Heritage Month. One, what is this window of time to you, but specifically, why are you in this conversation? What are you excited to share with the audience today?
Yep, just briefly, I think of the month as a celebration. And I often tell Latinx founders and funders, like, get your swagger up. Like, you've had to do so much to be in the spaces that you're in, especially if you're kind of competitive, if you will, for venture capital, building a venture scale business, or if you're at a place like Google, like, your distance traveled matters. And at least I see you for having done that. So I think of the month as a celebration. And like you said, conversations and tough ones, we often talk about, what does Latinx mean? Just briefly, to me, I think it's a way to describe our whole community. One way I told friends in Chicago was, if I call you Latina, I'm telling you how you identify as gender. If I call you Latino, I'm telling you how you identify gender-wise. And if I say Latinx, I'm not telling you how you identify. So again, it's an exciting month. I think every month should be a celebration. I think all these profiles and interviews and having, Googlers on CNBC, that should be all year, not just these 4 weeks, but it's an exciting month to look forward to every year.
I agree. Angela, would you mind answering the same question?
Sure. For me, the Hispanic Heritage Month is really special because it's a time to reflect, similarly to what you mentioned about like the contributions we've made, not just like mine, but just as a community. I also think it's a great opportunity to think about what I would love to do next as far as those contributions go and what kind of support system I need to build and connect with in order to make it scale. I am originally from Colombia, but I grew up in South Florida since the age of 8. So I feel like I'm from both worlds. But to me, it's a really special time and one that I love to share with family and also hear their take outside of tech on how things are going in their worlds.
Thanks, Angela. Ashley, how about you?
Yeah, it's such a great month. I'm half Puerto Rican, half Turkish. So I think for me, it means that, being Latinx is not some like one size fits all. Like we all have our different cultures. It's a warm culture. We're all supportive of each other. And I joined today's discussion to have a real conversation about sort of all these overlooked opportunities, particularly in the venture and startup ecosystems involving our community, and that it's okay to be proudly and uniquely you, because again, not all folks in this space look and act the same.
Let's talk a little bit about the opportunity. So if you do not know Tiq Chapa, this man in my mind is like the professor of the Latinx startup ecosystem in the United States. He's the brain trust for the data, the research, the numbers that people have been looking at for the past at least decade. Tiq built out the early roots of this work at Stanford, where he led a lot of the entrepreneurial studies behind understanding Latinx entrepreneurs and also consumers. So I want to jump into the numbers. Let's get straight to the opportunity. Tiq, can you tell us about that early research and sort of like what some of your findings were? And also, I guess it's now been a chunk of time. How has some of those findings evolved?
Yeah, so briefly, I'll say our story is a growth story, and then also one of kind of youth, and I'll talk more about that. But prior to Ulu, I was at a program called the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. And you said professor, I'll take associate professor for now. But at SLA, or the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative, I was working with a professor at Stanford's business school named Jerry Porras. So he said, well, there's not a lot of research around Latinx entrepreneurs. And he said, well, we have to go get data so then researchers can analyze it. So we built a database of over 2 million Latinx-led businesses across industries. And for the last 6 years have been surveying them every year. But a few kind of top line takeaways. So one is in the US today, there are over 5 million Latinx-led businesses. And again, that's all types, all industries, all sizes. I'll kind of dive in a bit more into tech and venture scale specific, but over 5 million businesses. Any industry that any human in the US is in, Latinx people are in. And we really, especially in metros that have a large segment of Latinx people, we have great outcomes, right? Of course, people think of Miami, but also New York, LA, also these kind of emergent hubs in the South, obviously Chicago, where I'm at now, but thinking about where we have density, we have even better outcomes, right? But at the same time, again, through these large cross-sectional surveys, Latinos sell to all markets, we sell all products. So there's this kind of universality. When we're 20% of the country today, we do it all. I'm preaching to the choir about that, but that was news to a lot of people. They had to hear Stanford say that, in order to believe it. So that's one thing. And then on the tech side, I think a lot about, we hear percentages, but the raw numbers are large. So if you think about the top 7, let's say tech companies, Google, of course, one of them, we still have tens of thousands of Latinx, engineers, marketers, product managers. So yes, the percentages are improving, hopefully, but in terms of raw numbers, when there's so many people in tech, Latinos 3, 5, 7%, that's still thousands, tens of thousands per firm. So that's a whole lot of talent that we're seeing now, many becoming founders or prototyping or being on advisory boards, being on startup boards. So we're seeing a maturation, and kind of this growth is really accelerating. And the youth, I think median age is roughly 30 for our community. So one last point I'll make is, I think the work we do now and the urgency we have is because I think we can do in one generation the kind of wealth creation for Latinx people that could take 2 or 3 generations if we just let it happen. So hats off to everybody here for your support of Latinx founders, Google employees, and your mentoring and near peer mentoring. It every little bit helps.
It kind of blows my mind, that idea of the single generation making that sort of impact. So many Latinx technologists or founders are often, first or second generation in the United States. You don't have this massive, you don't often see a very, very wide distribution of age of older Latin founders doing this work in the US like you might in other communities. And I think it's an exact testament to what you're saying. You also just brought up a point about wealth creation. And actually, I know that VamosVentures thinks a lot about this. Of course, you are a venture fund that is out to make returns, but you think about wealth creation as a part of your mission and as a part of the impact that you guys hope to make. Can you talk a little bit about wealth generation in the Latino community? Why is this important?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our missions is to promote this wealth creation, as you mentioned, and social mobility. And I think it is not only for a lot of founders and, everyone that's around them being inspired that we all can do this, no matter sort of what our means and backgrounds or upbringings. But I also think it's creating that diverse pipeline and contributing to it of future philanthropists, angel investors, role models. We think that innovation can come from anyone, anywhere. We think that now is sort of the tipping point. I mean, Tiq mentioned a bunch of these stats. There's a lot of momentum here. And, just take someone like me, for example, who, my mom's a postal worker, my dad's in construction. I literally knew nothing about VC until I got into college. It was sort of this like, la la land where only, a certain type of grad went into. And, from these sort of mentorship opportunities that I had for meeting people like Marcos, I finally sort of got an in. And so now it's in my opinion, my duty to sort of have this pay it forward mentality of, now that I have this sort of mobility and this opportunity for wealth creation, well, I'm going to help everyone else who is sort of in my place. And then Danny, you also brought up a good point about weighing, returns versus this impact focus. At Vamos, we think that you can have both, and we're seeing it, very thankfully in some of our investments already. Again, there's a really big untapped opportunity here with our community.
I remember when Marcos had the idea of Vamos in a PowerPoint deck, and he had since raised $50 million for the fund. I think you mentioned that part of that success has a lot to do with timing and the market opportunity, people being willing to understand that kind of that additional sort of impact that people want to get behind and invest in. Practically, what does that mean for Vamos? Like, how do you actually think about impact when you think about your deal flow, when you actually end up investing in a company? What does that mean to live out your mission of supporting not just your own returns, but of making that positive impact?
More and more founders look to investors who care about financial returns, but also impact and diversity. The mission alignment is becoming a bigger thing. I literally had a founder, come to me and say, "We're a fintech company, but we care about who's on our cap table and how they keep us accountable to the types of even end customers we reach." Right, like the Latinx consumer is becoming increasingly important for a lot of companies. And I think younger folks are also caring a lot about it too, both from like the founder and LP perspective. We're not giving out money freely for just lip service. There's, again, meaningful high return opportunities in the communities we look at, and we are tracking to see some of this. And I think for us, the way that our process is a little bit different maybe from other venture funds is that a no from us isn't really a no. It might be a no if maybe capital at the time or investment might not be a right fit, but we're more than happy to include you as sort of part of the family and introduce you to folks who might be helpful to you, or think about that impact accountability component or tracking, or set up a call for pitch feedback. A great example of this was this company called Pasito. They're focused on sort of inclusive employee benefits for caregivers. It was too early for VamosVentures, but I connected them to an organization that we could talk more about, VC Familia. And they're really great in the ecosystem and supporting both founders and funders. And they went on to go, win an equity-free pitch competition. So I think it's sort of support no matter what. Yes, we care about financial returns, but we also care about supporting the community. We're also looking for deals that are in overlooked geos, right? That correlate to diverse founders as well. And we're reaching out to them for conversations, whether they're actively fundraising or not, and just getting their names out there and saying that here, we're a partner.
One sort of, in addition to the Latinx consumer opportunity in the United States, oftentimes people will bring up the relationship with startups, Latinx-led startups, easily being able to deploy their businesses in Latin America. Angela, this is something that you have done, one, because you are Colombiana, but also it is the very nature of Tjiko and your startup. Can you talk a little bit about that for your business, but also like that idea of the opportunity for Latinx-led founders to easily be able to sort of operate between across the Americas?
Sure, definitely. So when I used to work at Google before starting my own company, I was a designer within that team. I worked there for 5 years. And after I left Google, I started thinking, okay, what kind of product do I want to build? And I had some like vague ideas. I wanted to stay within the connective space because I love, bringing people together through technology. I've worked on products like FaceTime and Messages and the Google Assistant, all these things that bring folks together. The second thing that I also wanted to focus on was reconnecting with my Latina roots. And by that, I meant finding ways to engage with my Latino community back home, and also how that would impact other Colombians or other Latinos across the US, because I felt like my experience being detached from my native country was not unique to me. It's like something we all have in common and we want to reconnect. And then the third component was really the most important one, which was how do I help whether in this case Colombians, because that's where I was starting, or Latinos in Latin America, to find a global stage to have another source of income. So I thought, okay, what can I do with all those factors? And I created basically, this is pre-pandemic, a digital coaching platform, or you can call it like virtual classes, for an array of topics centered around like lifestyles, and eventually started pivoting into early childhood education. And so I wanted to connect these amazing experts that were untapped in Latin America with Latinos in the US for things like cooking classes, because for me personally, I wanted to learn how to make Colombian food. And like I started experimenting with my own preferences and obviously doing a lot of research. And so what I think came out of that initial research phase is just, it's such a huge market. There are so many people across Latin America that are extremely talented, willing to, test out a new platform like mine, and engage with users, not just in the US. We had people in Europe and Canada and other parts also connecting at the early stages. And to me, it just seems like a huge potential with Latin America, and one that I'm very, very proud to have started from the get-go with those two components in mind.
Tjiko, you heard it here first. Check it out. Also, fun fact to everybody that is watching, Angela was among the 2 original designers of the first 500 emojis at Apple ever.
That's why I say I love the communication design.
The party popper emoji, whenever you use it, think of Angela. Engagement ring, right here, celebrity. Tiq, this is for you. Why do you think the VC industry is just behind in understanding and serving the segment? From your own research, do you have any additional insights or anecdotes to share here?
I think, one thing is a lot of people don't know how to identify talent, I would say, especially Latinx talent. And so I see many, so that's one. And then also we have nowhere to go but up for our Latinx GPs, VCs, people in the ecosystem, angel investors. I think we're seeing that growth, especially women and Latinx angels, I think is quickly growing. So I think signals that they see as downside, I see as upside. So some examples, if you're from a flagship engineering university in Latin America, I think that's great. Other people don't register. If you went to community college, which many Latinos in STEM have gone, I think that's a powerful thing that speaks to distance traveled. Other people don't register it or see it as a downside. I also know when on the median, Latinos in the US have about 10 cents to the dollar household wealth. What that leads to structurally in VC is that friends and family round that often gets people a year to 2 years, so 12 to 24 months of runway of learning. We don't have that kind of on the median. So then you don't have friends and family. So then you're pitching an accelerator and you've done 6 to 12 months of full-time work, maybe because you had to stay part-time at your day job, versus somebody else who's had 18 months full-time. So you're pitching the same accelerator and you just maybe at a little earlier, right? So for founders that have traction, have something in the wild, and especially with enterprise, have enterprise customers and clients who've done that without the friends and family around, to me, that's a very powerful signal that you've had to, function, definitely bootstrap, but also recruit, launch with, often 10 cents on the dollar that non-Latinx folks raise. So I think we know as diverse investors, Latinx investors, there are signals that show unbelievable competence and rate of learning, and others just don't understand them. And then also just people still are barely realizing Latin America's economic clout. People are barely realizing the power that U.S. Latinx have in the U.S. economy and are driving it. So, those are, I think, two drivers. And we'll make a living for a long time because of that, right? Ulu, Vamos, there's over 100 firms that are diverse-led, Black or Latinx in the last 2 years that are at the pre-seed and seed stage. So we see all these signals, great founders, especially at the earliest stages. We'll invest in them. They'll be discounted because we're not just overlooked, but we're undervalued. So prices will be still off the charts versus 2 years ago, but often, unfortunately for the founder, more affordable for the VC. So underlooked and undervalued. We were finding folks, seeing them and investing early. And hopefully that changes. Hopefully people are racing us to Latinx-led startups soon. And I hope to get bumped from a Stanford Latinx Googler deal because somebody came in with better terms faster. I can't wait till that happens every week, every month. I'm excited for that.
There are people, listening to this that have a say. What would your asks be? If you could give recommendations to folks in this space, in a safe space, what would those asks be to change course of that experience?
The first that comes to mind is near peer mentor. So sometimes I'll see Latinos who want to kind of give back and they're a VP of engineering somewhere and then they want to tutor a third grader in reading, which I love the sentiment, but there's a lot more people that can teach a third grader how to read better than probably you can as a VP of engineering, unless you've moonlit, as an early childhood educator. So this near peer mentoring, if you've been leading teams for 15 years and there's somebody 1.5 tiers below and have been leading teams for 7 years, help them do it in what you did in 15 years, help them do it in 10. So I always think back to kind of this near peer mentoring. And then in terms of LPs, I think if someone is a first-time GP, but not a first-time investor, maybe co-invest and carve out kind of programmatically doing that to get to know that emergent GP. What I would say is, and echo this, diverse GPs, great founders are letting us in at any round because they know we care about them or more likely to care about them, but also can support them. So those early or emerging investors are going to get let into rounds that other firms are not going to get access to. And again, I spoke to already the signaling, the ability to see signals of great founders in ways others are not. But I think just programmatically as LPs, co-invest early. Maybe a GP has 2 or 3 court deals that they had at their prior large firm. I think really do deep diligence there, knowing that they've had less opportunity on the median. So rather than having 10 deals and then you kind of find a distribution, look at 3 and be mindful that, hey, weigh those heavily. And I think be mindful of this difference in opportunity. Near peer mentor, and for LPs, co-invest early with GPs and get to know them that way.
There are some folks also in the room that are thinking about entering a career in VC. Ashley and Tiq, the two of you have recently done this. Ashley, do you want to talk about that? If you were to give 2 pieces of advice for those that are interested in entering the space?
Yeah, I think just sort of be fearlessly you and, have a unique, embrace your unique perspective. I think, every investor can be loud on Twitter or other mediums. But at the end of the day, it's sort of about getting deals done. And if you do have an expertise in a certain vertical, let's call it, the future of commerce, make that known and put out there your unique perspective. And I think the deal flow will be coming to you. And if something like, investing in Latinx founders or Black founders or whatnot is important to you, also make that known. It's interesting how just one LinkedIn post has these network effects. And then people are like, oh, okay, this person cares about this. That person looks like me or has a similar background to me. I feel like this person's relatable. And so I'm going to reach out to them, whether, again, it's for funding or not. So that's my first piece of advice. And, if you're trying to break into this industry that is venture, I think doing the job before you get the job. If there are investors that you really admire, I've admired Marcos for a long time, hence why I joined VamosVentures. When I was in business school, I just started sending him interesting deals or what was going on in sort of like the Latinx community at MIT or at Harvard. And he really appreciated that. So I think sort of that proactive nature and the hustle that is so inherent in, being a Latina or Latino or what have you is really important. And I think to create a better path generally for all of us, I think it's simple. It's just put us in more positions of influence and trust us to be decision makers. Despite the Latino population, I think making up close to 20% of the US population now, we're only 2% of the total venture capital ecosystem, right? That's a problem. And most places haven't done much to improve these stats. The majority of funds have 0 Latinx professionals. I think that means that diverse founders are coming to these funds and thinking, well, again, I can't relate to this person on the other side of the table. I've had founders come to me and say, Ashley, I feel like I could trust you, or it's reassuring to sort of speak to someone like you in the space. And I think, if you have the means, whether you're a corporation or an organization or, you want to fund these types of programs, I think just being engaged and listening and trusting us to be in, again, areas or places that we can make decisions and really improve the landscape is really important. And I think that's the answer for me.
Last year, we on the Google for Startups team launched the Black Founders Fund. And what this was is kind of an experiment to see if we could make a substantive dent in that massive disparity that exists for Black and Latinx founders that they often face when raising capital, that super early hump that's needed to get over and taken seriously into the rooms, many of the rooms that you described, not really, having access to. What we did is we took $5 million in non-dilutive capital and distributed it in 100K checks to found cash and hands-on support to Black founders across the United States. That $5 million in less than a year netted $50 million in follow-on capital because that founders were able to get past that first hump. They were able to, one, use that money, but two, be able to say, hey, Google has invested in my business. That means something, but also prove the traction that they needed to be taken seriously, in which their counterparts did not really have to prove. They were more given the benefit of the doubt or just given a pass that, oh, we trust that you'll do this because you have the street cred, and we'll take this bet on you. We have since done another $5 million for the Black community, and we'll be doing the same for the Latino community at the beginning of this year. So I highly encourage that you apply to this program because Tjiko is a great fit, and it's also, we're looking to build a cohort of founders that will look out for each other and will contribute to the community. And I think that you'd make an amazing contributor to that. So just a quick plug for the Latino Founders Fund.
Thank you. No, Danny, that's so awesome. And I'm so excited that you guys are focusing on Latinx because there's so much talent across the US alone for these types of founders. And they're so passionate, so hardworking. They really know their community and the wealth of possibilities that can come out of it. And just as a quick little thing that I read recently, according to the US Census, by the year 2060, 1 of 3 Americans will be Hispanic. So I'm why aren't we focusing deeper into this market and addressing their needs? So I'm super thrilled by that fund that you were speaking about. Thank you.